Now welcoming our next speaker, which is Mr. Ramesh Sharma. Ramesh ji is a grassroots environment activist and the General Secretary for Ekta Parishad, which is a mass-based people's movement for land rights with an active membership of thousands of landless poor people. Ramesh ji has played an instrumental role in strengthening and expanding Ekta Parishad as one of the most significant people's struggle, and has worked on issues such as the land rights, farmers' rights, rights of the tribal, nomad, and Dalit communities, women, and so many more issues. So we would like to welcome you, Ramesh ji, and over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks to the organizers and thanks to the audience also to give me this opportunity to speak on behalf of Ekta Parishad to all of you. And it's really a pleasure to listen to the previous speakers. It was really insightful. So friends, I'm not going to present any kind of a PowerPoint presentation. It's my just simple experiences I'm sharing with all of you. Just a little bit about my work, because Kavya has especially requested me to talk about my own journey. So my own journey started with my schooling. I did my schooling in village schools in Chhattisgarh. I did my graduation. I completed my B.Tech, and then after I have done my post-graduation in natural resource economics. And then later I done half of my doctoral degree from IIT Delhi on indigenous technological knowledge. And that was, sometime I realized that since beginning, I was more inspired to go for the activism rather than for the academics. So I decided to go back to the forest of Bastar, the South Bastar in Chhattisgarh, and I started to live with a community in the place called Abujmar, which is a very special area. Probably you know it's a unsurveyed land called no man's land. I stayed there for almost like 5 years, and then I joined the organization Ekta Parishad. So Ekta is a unity and Parishad is a forum. So it's not just a one registered organization, but it's a kind of an umbrella which brings more than 2,000 grassroots organizations working together for protecting the rights of the indigenous people, the fisher folks, nomads, and the women, especially on the ground. Ekta Parishad is also known and obsessed with the way of doing the foot marches. And we are known for doing a lot of foot marches on the ground. I remember my first foot march was way back in the year 99, when we have walked more than 3,500 kilometers in 194 days. And then after there was a agreement with the government of Madhya Pradesh, and certain legislation came to protect the rights of the indigenous communities and the Dalit communities in Madhya Pradesh. But the most significant was of 2007. The name of campaign called Janadesh, when 25,000 people, we walked from the place called Gwalior to Delhi. Imagine 25,000 people walking in the national highway for a month. And when we reached Delhi, we finally successfully have advocated and negotiated for a new legislation called Forest Rights Act. There was many other parallel movement, but our walk with 25,000 people was kind of a final push for the government to come into the negotiation table and do negotiation. And why this particular legislation is important, I have to tell you here, because this is the one legislation which actually recognizes the rights of the indigenous community and the forest dweller over their land, forest resources, and the natural resources. And we do strongly believe that they are the custodians of the nature. They are the custodians of the natural resources, which actually they own and they conserve, they protect since ages. But I was also part of various other committees, especially for drafting a national land reforms policy in 2013, drafting a Homestead Guarantee Act in 2012 and 2013. In 2014, I was a part of the drafting committee of voluntary guideline on land tenure. This is a very, very special document actually released by FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, UN, and which actually talked about protecting the land and livelihood rights, the environmental rights of the marginalized communities, the fisher folks, nomads, indigenous people, hill tribes, etc. So, and then finally, in 2021, I was actually appointed as a member of the Global Hub for the Indigenous People. This is again, it's a kind of international institution created by a lot of research and the UN agencies. And I'm also part of the Champions Network, which actually now we are involved in the UN Convention for the Food Systems. And with the lens of the food systems, we are talking on so many different issues, which actually my previous speakers have discussed here. So this is a little journey about my own organization. But let me briefly talk about the communities whom we are working with. As I said, that they are the tribals, they are the nomads, they are the fisher folks, they are the pastoral community who are living with the nature since ages. Their tradition and belief system based on the deep respect of nature, and they have a strong sense of place and belongings. Unsurprisingly, indigenous people have been a strong opponent of changes, the changes which is actually imposed from beyond in the name of development. They defend their land rights against the illegal encroachment, against the destructive exploitations from their in the name of mega dam and in the name of the logging because of the mining operations and because of the other forestry related projects. So that actually can make them an ideal custodian for their landscape and their ecosystem. So it's very important to understand that why these people are fighting. As I mentioned, that their livelihood is actually dependent on the natural resources. So whenever they have a threat, whenever they threat to lose their natural resources, they fight and they stand and they speak out against them. So it's all about the ecological footprint of non-indigenous community created over the last few decades. Today, we need to answer whether we are living within our means or we are eating the ecological capital of nearly 100 million people. In India, according to our own estimate, nearly 100 million people are directly dependent on nature for their life and livelihood, because they derive their livelihood from the nature-based occupations. So, but the dramatic changes of land use and uncontrolled grab of natural resources have transformed the biosphere, we know. And if I take the data of the international researchers, which actually say that 70% of the grassland, 50% of the savanna land, 45% of the temperate forest, and 27% of the tropical forest are already disappeared forever. Can you imagine? So, and if you take the reference of very recent report of UNCCD of 2012, it says that the 40% of interstate conflict over 60 years period were associated with the grab of land and natural resources as a result of predatory economic model. So that's how they are the legitimate fighter to challenge the whole development model, which actually displacing the millions of people every year. 80% of the major armed conflict between 2007 and 2014 were occurred in the vulnerable dry ecosystem. So that shows the quantum of conflict which is actually emerging from the ground. So let me conclude by saying the future challenges of development perspective, plans and programs and policies need to be judged by the ecological footprint and the cost of changes the local community paying for. We need to stand up and speak out for the survival of the weakest. Let me continue my conversation, because nowadays there is a lot of discussion and debate around the climate change process. And I mean, recently there is an IPCC report, it's actually released, and the whole a new way of dialogue and discourse has been actually emerged. But if you allow me, I would prefer to use the phrase called climate crisis. For me, the change is a reversible process, but crisis is not a reversible process. Crisis is an irreversible process. And the way we are dealing with those communities, we are dealing with the nature, especially the people like indigenous people who are living, we are actually creating a huge amount of crisis for their life. Today, a certain set of crisis injected through irrational changes and has derooted the millions of tribal community in many ways. On 9th of August 2011, the UN Secretary General said, and I quote, the world that how certain climate crises become irreversible and pushing the entire humanity towards a dangerous end. So even the UN Secretary General recognized the whole process of development and how the whole developmental process is actually displacing a large number of people on the ground. According to the UN Working Group on Human Rights report of 2012, which says that nearly 26 million tribal people have been displaced or evicted. Can you imagine? This is the 25% of the total tribal population in India. So 25% of the tribal population is actually displaced or derooted forever. There is no resettlement or rehabilitation actually made, or dignified rehabilitation and resettlement made for them. And for what? For deforestation, dam project, mining project, urbanization, and various other infrastructural projects. In the recent past, the changes in the weather cycle deeply and negatively impacted the agriculture cycle, especially for the tribal and other nature-dependent community. If you can see the variety, the verticals of the vulnerability with respect to the life and livelihood of these community, we may end by saying this is the total disregard of ecological or the nature's root. Interestingly, the tribal community in India own the richest heritage of indigenous knowledge system conserved over centuries and still remain relevant for saving their life and livelihood. Being a student of indigenous technological knowledge systems, we have found that the tribal community now rediscovering the traditional knowledge system, which are deeply rooted in their agriculture system. When growing rice has become a more and more challenging between the erratic rainfall and unpredictable rainfall pattern, the Muria Madhyas of South Bastar in Chhattisgarh restarted growing ancient variety of rice called Satka. Usually, one of the shortest duration of rice could be harvested in 80 to 90 days. So this is the shortest duration, which is actually invented by the IRI, International Rice Research Institute, Manila. But the Satka variety of rice, the wild rice, which is actually grown from Muria and Madhya in South Bastar, which is actually ready to harvest within 60 to 65 days. So this is a miracle, and they are actually rediscovering and reintroducing because they want to fight and they want to challenge the whole crisis which actually emerging around them. In the course of shifting cultivation, although shifting cultivation has already been banned in India officially, but the Baga community in the Maikal hills of Madhya Pradesh, they still do practice the shifting cultivation, and they grow more than 20 varieties of food grain, pulses, oil seeds, vegetables, just in one cropping year. So this was all the reason why we decided to fight and protect the rights of the indigenous people, the rights of the nomads, the rights of the forest dwellers, and to come up with a proposal of Forest Rights Act, which was actually recognized and implemented since 2008. And believe me, I'm very happy to say here that after the big effort of 2007 and 2012, when the Forest Rights Act came through the effort of Ekta Parishad and many other people's movement, more than 20 million people, imagine more than 20 million people, they have received their land entitlement. And now they have rights over their individual land, as well as they have rights over their common property land and resources. So let me conclude here by saying this is the high time to think, shape, establish, and execute the new system of education. I would prefer to say the green education, which could at least respect and recognize the wisdom of 100 million people who have nature-based life and livelihood.
Yes.
So let me stop here, and if there's any question or immediate response, I'll be happy to take that.
Awesome. I think your address is really, really inspiring. I think it moved me again. I want to come in and say that I'm very passionate about working with rural and tribal people. And what you said made so much sense, because in a way it meant that our daily actions impact those in the rural and tribal areas, the communities that are living so far away from us. So I think that point was brought in really well, Ramesh sir. And I'll just look at the questions once, if there's any missing questions that we would like to ask you.
I just had one question.
Yeah.
Hi, Ramesh, Kavya here. So I think we wanted to really know that what kind of actions of ours actually do impact rural tribal communities, like indirectly, but what is it that we can do to live a more responsible and conscious life, not just towards the environment, but towards the vulnerable people who get impacted by our actions? Could you just briefly talk a little bit about a few things we could do?
Right. So, I mean, let me answer your question about directly and indirect way. What are the four most unsustainable thing which we are doing today, the world is doing today? There are many, but I'll just take only four because we have a shortage of time. The one is the unsustainable way of farming. The way state, the transgovernmental organization, the international organization promoting the chemical-based or biochemical-based agriculture system, which, believe me, I'll quote the research which is actually done by many international organizations, which says that we have already lost more than 2 billion hectares of land because of the unsustainable farming system. So here we need to understand, we need to adopt the way so that we can protect the nature as well as we fill the stomach of the 7 billion people in the earth. So I think going back towards the natural farming, going back towards the organic agriculture, going back towards the agroecological farming is the only way for future if we really want to protect our people as well as the biodiversity. The second very, very important negative thing which is actually happening, and there is a huge amount of debate, one can easily challenge me, but I would prefer to say the most unecological way of urbanization we are doing today. I have did a lot of research in association with the Cologne University, and we find that over last 70 years of journey, we have lost more than 90,000 villages. So the 90,000 villages are completely wiped out from the map of India because of the urbanization and because of the infrastructural projects. Every minute, we are actually destroying a real fertile soil. If we take the example, there is a very interesting document called Soil Atlas. If I refer the Soil Atlas, which says that equivalent of the 30 football fields are consumed by cement and concrete every minute. Can you imagine 30 football fields every minute we are destroying? One of the most fertile soil which can actually give the food and good health for everyone. The third, the most unsustainable thing which we are doing is an uncontrolled mining. In India, I was the part of the drafting committee, Mines and Minerals Development Regulation Act of 2010. And then in 2015, we were in the part of the advisory committee. And we know that there is an aggressive effort by the mining company to extract all mineral resources. We have to understand that these are the finite resources. So if we are extracting everything, that means we are not really concerned about the intergenerational right or equity. We are concerned only about our life. We are not concerned about the future generation. So that's why I would say that the whole uncontrolled mining need to be checked properly and immediately. And the last thing, which I think very, very important, the fourth factor is the ecological credit crunch in the living planet, that humans are using 30% more resources than the earth can replenish every year, which is leading to deforestation, degraded soil, polluting air and water, the dramatic decline in the flora and fauna, and a constant increase in the ecological depth. So we are overshooting the biosphere capacity. Is there any moral checks to the consumer's voracity? Who are the responsible for alarming planet trashing today? So here we need to decolonize. We need to transfer our own personality, our own way of life, our own way of thinking, our own way of consuming, our own way of looking the world, our own way of looking the tomorrow. If we are not ready to do today, probably we are going to invite a big threat. And as I said, if this trend of the consuming the voracity, the consumer voracity will continue, probably by 2030 or 2040, we need 2 planets. And it's not possible to search the another earth here. So let me conclude by saying that, I mean, I do believe, being a Gandhian organization, I have a strong faith on the nonviolent resistance, on the nonviolent campaigning. And we do a lot of nonviolent campaigning, and we are known for that. One thing which always, the one quote of Gandhi, which always inspired me, what he said, and I quote, "If you are not indifferent, the world will be different." So here it's a choice of us, whether we want to be indifferent or whether we want to change and whether we want to be different. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ramesh ji. I think you spaced it out this session very well. We got to know so many aspects about your journey and got to learn so much from you. There was just one very pressing question all the participants had. It's about the skills that are required essentially when you are in this kind of field and what kind of challenges you face. This is something you've touched upon, but focusing on the skills, if you could just give us a few set of skills that you feel are a must if you want to get into this field or if you want to do something in terms of like leading a movement. So if you could just elaborate on that a little bit.
I think my previous speakers, they have also already answered, but let me continue by saying that only two things very shortly. The one is openness to learn, and especially to recognize and respect the truth and justice. So here, sometime we keep, whenever we go for the social activism in the field, I mean, I do with my, I did with my own. I was actually educated in the IIT Delhi, and then I started work with the community, Muria, Maria, and South Bastar. I decided to start to de-learn. So the whole de-learning process, the de-orientation is very, very important, especially if you really want to associate with the community and directly work with the community. So this is a very, very important. And the second thing, which I personally felt is it's extremely important, is a deeper patience and the passion for building the understanding. But here, I would again repeat what Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. So if we are not ready to change ourselves, if we are not ready to transform ourselves, it's very, very difficult to change the world. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, sorry. I was just saying that we had one question which is a little interesting on, have you faced any threats while you were doing this work? So did you have anything? I think Aruna had, yeah.
Many, but I don't want to waste the time of the next speaker. I'm pretty that listening Shweta would be equally interesting. But I had been actually attacked. I was jailed also. There was several cases it's actually lost against me. My legs were broken. So yeah, I had many challenges in my life.
The way you're speaking with such a big, broad smile on your face, Ramesh, it's like, I mean, it's interesting to know this angle also exists and how you've gotten through it. So great. Thank you so much for sharing your experience.
Thank you.